Good afternoon, everybody. This is Bob Cohen, Vice President of Research at ArdentPartners, and I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar, The State of ePayables in 2021, Operating in the New Normal. I am honored to have iPayables with me as a sponsor of today's webinar, and we have a fact-filled and information-filled presentation ahead for you, and so we hope you enjoy it. So let's kind of jump right in and get started. So we're going to talk about what's going on within the state of AP. As we all know, the past year and a half have been like nothing else we've ever experienced, and this impacted AP. So we're going to take a look at how accounts payable was impacted. Then we'll take a look at the technology aspect of accounts payable and some of the trends that are going on within the industry and how they compare to what was going on previously in quote unquote normal times as opposed to the past year and a half or so. And then we'll take a look at what best-in-class accounts payable looks like. So this is the top 20% of all respondents with the lowest cost and time to process an invoice compared to everybody else. So it kind of gives you an understanding of where the best-in-class are, how they achieve the best-in-class results, and where everybody else stands, and the kind of the gap between the two and things that you can do to make up that gap, if you will. And then at the end, we'll talk some strategies for success, some actionable items that you can put into practice right away. So I am honored to be joined by Scott McKeon, the Chief Growth Officer at iPayables, and Scott and I will be going back and forth with a bunch of questions and collaboration during the presentation. Scott has an extensive background within accounts payable and finance, so he will provide us with a unique perspective, not only from the end user client perspective that he deals with at iPayables, but also from his previous experience. So welcome, Scott. I'm glad to have you with me today.
Great. Thanks, Bob. It's great to be here.
And I am Bob Cohen, Vice President of Research for ArdentPartners. I head up our ePayables practice. With that, I am going to turn this over to Scott to talk a little bit about iPayables, and then he'll hand it back over to me. Scott, tell us about iPayables.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is great. We've been around for a while. 20 plus years, and you know what we feel, at least in the U.S., one of the originals in e-invoicing with the supplier portal engaged, and it's been a great experience. We're mostly focused on large enterprise organizations with a little more complexity in the accounts payable process, with multiple business units, oftentimes integrating with multiple ERPs, and just a depth of functionality and flexibility within the application. So you can see we're processing billions of dollars through our platform, and it's a global reach, both in terms of the countries we service and suppliers in those countries, but also the languages within the application. So it's been something that certainly we've had steady growth over the last few decades, but what we've seen recently is really just a strong focus on leveling up that automation in, as you mentioned here, best in class, and we'll talk about that today, but really being able to just take what a lot of organizations have in place and stretching that to really produce what we talk about, straight through processing, as few touches as possible in the AP automation process. So that's us. And a couple quick, just logos on some of the partners, and we really call it a partnership. We've got a legacy of learning and application that has been stretched and challenged over the course of decades by large organizations in multiple industries that really has helped us to create this flexible application that can work for a lot of businesses and a lot of phases of points that those businesses are in, and just a depth of functionality that can really stretch and meet the needs of large and especially I'd say even growing organizations that maybe started with a bit of a smaller solution, but as they've expanded and acquired and merged, they're looking for something with a little more robust ability. So this is just a little background on us here.
Great, thanks. And looking forward to getting your perspective, what some of your clients are doing and prospects are saying as we go through the presentation, and how they compare and contrast to what we're seeing from the broader audience. So A little bit about Ardent Partners, for those of you that may not be familiar with us, and hopefully many of you are. We're a Boston-based research and advisory firm that's laser focused on supply management and the source to pay processes, which include procurement, AP, procure to pay, B2B payments, and the contingent workforce. We advise clients and we publish research that help business decision makers understand industry best practices and how to improve performance. We also produce research that covers the technology landscape and help professionals identify the best fit solutions for them based upon their size of organization, their budget, and requirements. And something that we're doing much more in the past year or two is helping clients with buying technology in the spaces that we cover here. We produce a report called the Technology Advisor, which is a stack ranking of various solutions that cover the market. And we're also involved in a number of RFP processes for organizations looking to automate their outdated manual processes, or even as Scott mentioned, sometimes they've automated part of the process and looking to go the next mile with that. So it's something that we can definitely help organizations with, and something that we do. And we also have a site which I manage called Payables Place, which has information on research that we're producing, presentations that we're doing, news and whatnot. So I encourage you to take a look at that. It's built for AP professionals specifically, and finance professionals, anyone involved with AP. And so go to Payables Place if you're interested in that. So our research process and what we're looking at today are the results from our annual State of ePayables market research report. This is the 16th annual themed report. It's part of an ongoing dialogue that Ardent Partners analysts have with AP, finance, treasury, and other individuals for over a decade. We follow a rigorous process that's been developed over those 16 years, spent researching the AP market. The report that we're going to take a look at today represents almost 200 AP, P2P, and finance leaders, as captured from March to May of 2021 this year, as well as direct interviews that I conducted with survey respondents to kind of add the color commentary and find out a little bit more in-depth information from respondents and from practitioners like yourself, and to see what they were going through and how this year differed from previous years and how they responded, how prepared they were, etc. These participants that take the survey and the ones that I speak to help us define the best in class performance, and also help us understand what these leading groups do, what levers they pull in order to obtain their advantage. It's something we're excited to share with you today here. So let's take a look at the demographics of the report for context on the data. So what we see is that respondents are almost entirely coming from AP, P2P, and finance. That's 82%. If we add in procurement, which is very relevant to AP, because many of the folks that we work with in our practice have the full P2P responsibility. So if you add in the procurement, it's 94%. So basically, why I'm mentioning this is that these are people like yourselves in accounts payable that have responsibility for making sure that invoices are sent by suppliers, received, processed, and paid in a timely fashion there. We have a very senior audience. 51% of our respondents are director level or higher. This is important because means we're getting answers from respondents who really know what's going on from a business perspective and a strategic perspective, as well as those that are doing the work. So it's almost a 50-50 split between AP managers, staff level, and then more senior individuals. So it's a great cross-section of responses, and we're happy to see that in the results here. It's also about a 50-50 split between large organizations over $1 billion and those under $1 billion, the SME market. Why is that important? Because sometimes what we see is that large organizations may have certain tendencies and smaller ones have other. So we want to blend them together to get an understanding of what the market's doing across the board. And then finally, almost 3/4 of respondents are from North America, with the remaining 27% or so coming from EMEA. And this once again gives us a good cross-pollination of not only what's being done here in North America, but what's being done on a global basis. Because while there's many similarities in AP, there's also some subtle differences when it comes to compliance and payments and government regulations. So it's good to understand that international perspective as well. So in the age of globalization, a pebble tossed halfway around the world can have a rippling effect that builds across the oceans and lands as a tidal wave. The coronavirus that we've experienced and are still experiencing is that pebble, excuse me. It's the cause of a truly global pandemic. Supply chain is in the news more than it ever has been before. And more people are hearing the word supply chain and understanding just how significant and dependent we are on a global basis for everything that we do here. We all know about shortages in this product or that product, increased prices, long delays in getting products supplied to us. And this is all a result of the pandemic. And so what started, maybe small has had ripple effects across the world that's here. In 2020, AP has never been more important to business operations and business results. It's also been looked at in a different vein. It's been looked at for maintaining continuity, for maintaining and improving cash flow, and also for the important piece of how do we pay our suppliers? Because, when the pandemic first struck, what we saw was many CFOs in times of uncertainty want to hold on to their cash. So rather than paying early or maybe taking an early payment discount or paying when an invoice was ready to be paid, they decided to hold on to their money longer, just waiting to see, what was really going to happen. Were we going to have to lead a cash crunch, or were things going to open back up? So AP was put into a spotlight. There was more visibility on AP than we ever saw before. And, so now we're taking a look at, how AP responded to that. And, one thing that we've seen is that over the past year and a half, AP's importance has risen to all-time highs, and it remains at that apex. So let's take a look at some of these results here and what's going on. We all know that the pandemic was not an equal opportunity disruptor. It crowned winners and losers, and the dichotomy was striking. And it was to no credit or fault of any person or any business. It's just some were better prepared to handle what happened, and some industries were better suited for the needs and requirements than others were. But one of the great things about the AP profession is its commonality across industry and across region, which means that best practices and metrics and recommendations that we've been tracking for years are broadly applicable to everybody working in the industry. I should also note that the AP job market is hot right now. And so for those of you in your current roles that are looking to maybe explore in some additional responsibilities, now is a good time to investigate the job market, maybe surprised at what's out there and the respect and compensation levels that are now being attributed to AP. So just kind of on a personal note there, something that may be of interest to you. So the last edition of the annual State of ePayables report we published in May of 2020. It was written during the height of chaos and uncertainty when the COVID-19 pandemic was just hitting the US and there was tons of uncertainty. Working from home, social distancing, and the nonstop barrage of headlines tracking the real-time human toll that the pandemic had taken, combined with the sizable confusion, both genuine and manufactured, made it difficult to focus really on anything else since the coronavirus was impacting just about every facet of society. And what we're seeing is that its continuing impact in 2021 is really of no surprise. As we see here, all but a very few have felt the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, with 63% of businesses across the world experiencing a significant to extraordinary impact over the past 16 months. So while you think some industries may not have been impacted, what we're seeing here is that almost 2/3 of industries said it was significant to extraordinarily impactful. Now, we wanted to take a look at which areas were impacted most by COVID. And, not surprisingly, sales and revenue and cash was number one. But what's interesting here is that while some saw a degradation of sales and revenue based upon the industry that they were in, others saw a market increase. So if you happen to be in technology, if you happen to be versus being in the retail sector, the brick and mortar sector, or you were in hospitality, restaurants, hotels, travel, your revenue was impacted negatively, but those in the technology space saw a market increase in demand for their solutions. Additionally, internal operations were significantly impacted. 25% of respondents said that was the most significant area of impact. And when you think about it, it's not surprising, because while some organizations were prepared for anything that came their way, many organizations were not. And so they were all of a sudden thrust into, how do we handle the work from home? How do we handle remote workers? How do we handle all the different issues that are taking place here? So it's kind of interesting to see which areas were impacted most here, from this. So as I mentioned before, the perception or the focus on AP is kind of at an apex. It's never been higher than it is today. And today, 67% of respondents state that the value of AP to their organization is either viewed as exceptionally valuable or very valuable. This is up, markedly over from just, a couple of years ago. So I wanted to bring Scott in at this point in time. And Scott, you've talked to many of your existing clients throughout the pandemic, and it's something that you do on an ongoing basis, as well as talking to many prospects, during the past year and a half. Why do you think, what are you seeing out there as far as perception of AP, and why is it at its highest level it's ever been?
Well, I think just as you mentioned, it's the manual aspect of a lot of those back office functions where, immediately you had people sent home to work, but still had to get into the office to gather the paper invoices coming in. And they in a lot of cases, right at the beginning, they couldn't all do it together. And so they'd be taking turns. And we were talking to accounts payable folks prior, at the beginning and throughout. And it was just interesting to see how it did shift. It shifted quickly when businesses were faced with having to, focus on their human resources and where are they at, and they could figure out, okay, these people can be at home, these people can be on Zoom. Here's what we can do with who are the ones that are absolutely critical that need to be into the office. and accounts payable rose to the top. And it's interesting to have a lot of these conversations prior to COVID, where we would have good conversations with different stakeholders that are involved in automation, but challenging to get the attention. And we would be on the list, oh yeah, we want to do this. There's an automation initiative in place, just not quite this year. And it was a can that kind of kept getting kicked down the row. But once this happened, it kind of rose to leadership's attention, saying, okay, wait, we have people coming in. Okay, because we have mail coming in. Okay, wait a second, why? Is there something different that we could do? So it has changed. Yeah, those discussions are now involving leadership a lot earlier, and in a lot of cases being driven by leadership to say, hey, let's get an initiative in place so that if and when now AP is great, and they figured out, in a lot of cases, rotation schedules amongst the staff, and they were able to stay safe and get their job done. But they all kind of recognize, we need to figure out a way to just, prevent something like this happening again in the future, and just get ourselves a little more scalable and automated.
Great. And that kind of, the topics you're discussing here kind of lead us into the top priorities for 2021. And with better perception comes more consideration and larger budgets, as Scott mentioned. And this makes pursuing top priorities more realistic. But the reality in 2021 is that AP groups are rarely first in line to receive budget increases and special project approvals. You still have to make your case. They're not just handing out money because, hey, we need to automate. There's a lot of other departments need to automate as well. But the good news is AP is part of that conversation, no longer kind of an afterthought as they were in many organizations. And as far as automating technology, hey, AP works fine. Why are we going to spend the money? for it. Now they understand what AP does at a much more granular level and the importance to business continuity. And so AP has, really kind of a seat at the table when it comes to those budget allocations and those raises, but they still need to make their case. The good news is that AP has become an area of investment. And most directly, what was shown in 2020 was that the AP automation market became as hot pretty much as any other enterprise software market out there. So when I look at the top priorities here, I see an industry that's finally realizing what we've been saying for years, is that AP can be a hub of intelligence. It's active and it continues to grow within the profession, but also it also continues to grow more broadly outside of AP, and finance and treasury and procurement are now seeing the merits of having all this information in AP shared and accessible. And so what we're seeing is that the top response here, is a more strategic priority than we've seen in the past. So you can see it outdistances number 2 there, which is, the ever-present reducing paper invoicing and reducing manual tasks. But now many more organizations are thinking more strategically, which is how do we improve the reporting and the data analytics? One of the quotes that I, love to use is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you can't manage it, you can't improve it. And so while we're really excited, why we're really excited to see the number 1 response here being reporting and analytics is because organizations are starting to realize that AP does more than just process paper and pay checks to suppliers. There's a strategic value that can really add to the business's bottom line overall.
Yeah, I'll just comment too on that, Bob, that just that you can see the last one on that list there was reducing costs. And I think that's where automation maybe started back in the day. And that was where people kind of thought, oh, that's really your core objective. And yeah, you can see that has fully flipped, where they now see it as, no, we're a key hub to the business, and being able to provide visibility throughout the organization is what will really get everybody's attention and help drive some real value.
Yep. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's the way AP, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, presented their case was just what you said, Scott. It's how do we reduce processing costs? And, while that's important to the organization, it didn't always get the attention or the budgets because it was a very tactical approach. But now as we're looking at AP as a hub of information, how it can improve, working capital management, how it can impact supplier relationships, and how the information that it has can help overall spend within the organization. We're starting to see this priority change, and the pitch that AP staffers are making when they're making their business case are much more strategic in nature and not tactical. And
exactly. I mean, look at the next 2 after data analytics and improving reporting. You oftentimes in the past thought that eliminating paper and manual tasks and getting suppliers in would help reduce your processing costs, and yet the reality is it's tied more closely to the one at the top. When you have reduction of paper and manual tasks, you're removing errors and you're allowing for visibility to be in. You now know when you're fully automated and electronic, where your accruals are. Those aren't sitting hidden somewhere on some clerk's desk waiting to get input. They're there immediately. So you now know, and have that information. We talk a lot about outcomes, not necessarily on, technology and the what, but we deliver the why. The why is so that everybody has good visibility, including your suppliers. They can know if they're submitting electronically, they know immediately whether or not there's been a match to the PO, or whether or not there's been an issue or with their invoice, and they can feel comforted in that. And they can also regularly access and see the visibility of the status of their invoice, so they don't have to necessarily bug accounts payable. So certainly that improves efficiencies and reduces costs down at the bottom, but that's much more of a byproduct rather than the driver of automation.
Yeah, and I think we could spend all day on the slide about just talking about it. But what you're talking about, Scott, is an important point. Is that AP automation is a journey; it's not a destination. And so we need to automate. We need to get out the inefficiencies, the errors, the exceptions that we're handling. And the byproduct of that will be reducing the costs of processing invoices. But we want to move to a more strategic role for AP. And that means once we've automated it, then we have all this data in one place, we can start interrogating the data and getting answers to questions and share those with the rest of the business so we can add value from an AP perspective in ways that you may not have thought of before. But I also like to say that AP, automation is not a destination, it's a journey that you just continually improve what you're doing and look for ways to add more value to the organization as a whole. Let's move on. So we do have a number of other slides here to cover here. So the top challenges, there's good momentum as we move into 2021, the second half of 21, but most AP groups are not without hurdles. In 2021, the standard challenges for AP remain top of mind and clearly highlight the need for end-to-end automation to manage invoice and payment processing. In fact, this year's top challenges to AP, such as lengthy approval times and the dreaded invoice exceptions, which you talked about a moment or two ago, reflect an even greater need for better overall visibility, management, and facilitation of court AP tasks. And the only way we're going to get this better visibility is through automation and through better reporting as to what's going on within the process itself. So while many AP functions were able to adapt to difficult changes and enhance their operations in the face of the unprecedented obstacles we faced over the last year and a half, sizable hurdles still exist for the typical AP department. AP's top challenges still remain very tactical in scope and are linked to everyday activities of receiving invoices, opening them up, processing the invoices, and then paying the invoices, pushing these things around. How do we manage the exceptions, etc. This creates organizational discord, as we all know and can imagine. But the problems that happen in AP, as Scott and I have talked about, don't stay in AP. They directly impact other parts of the business. If we're not paying suppliers on a timely basis, they're going to be picking up the phone and calling either the line of business contact I have or AP directly. This is taking away time from what these functions should be doing to drive value to the organization. And also suppliers, as we all know, if you frustrate a supplier long enough or often enough, they're not going to want to be a supplier with you if they have a choice. And many suppliers these days do have a choice on who they work with. And you think about who suppliers want to work with. They want to work with those buyers that are the easiest to work with, the ones that pay them on time, keep them informed, pay them the best rates. And the only way you can do that is by having a really automated and efficient process that you have there. And that's just, one of the interactions. That's outside of your organization. We also have huge impacts to finance, to procurement, to IT and treasury. Scott mentioned the accrual reporting going on there. If you're in an organization and you don't know what your outstanding liabilities are, and you only know how much cash you need when a payment is due, that puts Treasury in an unenviable position because they need to keep extra cash on hand for these, surprises, if you will, as opposed to knowing in advance exactly how much cash you need on hand to pay your suppliers at any point in time. It enables Treasury to improve their cash management. And when they improve their cash management, they can improve the return to the organization. If they improve the return on cash to the organization, that improves profitability overall. Scott, you kind of touched on this a little bit before, but why do invoice and payment approvals still take too long, and how does automating the process help alleviate these issues?
Yeah, it's just the payment of invoices. We were just talking to somebody recently. They were like, I want to get our organization where we can receive income quickly and pay slowly. In some cases, it's a lot of companies design it to move slowly just because they want to make sure that they've got everything right. They're not overpaying. They're not making mistakes. I mean, that's, buy low, sell high is kind of where everybody's focused. But what's happened is over time, some of those policies, procedures, practices have really slowed down the entire process. And it's gotten to where it's flipped the other way, where it's cumbersome. Like you said, there's, now suppliers are putting credit holds on actual orders and slowing down the business. So it's kind of come full circle where now it's sort of biting the business, and they need to get this fixed. it's taking too long because of what probably was put in place over years, maybe even decades.
Yeah, without a doubt. So let's take a look at the state of ePayables here. For a majority of leaders that were overseeing AP, the pandemic made it patently obvious that manual processes are no longer acceptable and had to be stricken from the workplace. Like their coworkers, a vast majority of AP professionals were not raised with a work from anywhere spirit and the ability to work easily from remote locations. This was something new for many or most in AP from the survey responses that we received, as well as the clients that we interviewed, not the clients, but the respondents that we interviewed here. This obviously quickly changed for AP departments that relied on ePayable systems to drive the processing, the communication, and collaboration. But others who weren't automated had little to no choice, but still to rely on traditional in-person office environments to manage the AP workload. You know, who would have thought that AP workers would have been considered essential workers to the organization, 2 years ago? Not very many people, but when the pandemic hit, if you were in a manual system, those invoices were being sent paper via mail or to a fax or PDF that needed to be printed off and then typed in or scanned in. And the same thing for routing around invoices for approval. There's no systems in place, automated systems in place, and then the same thing took place on the payment side of the fence here. But what we saw was those organizations that thrived during the toughest of times in 2020 were the ones that had the highest levels of automation and also the highest levels of stakeholder engagement, which enabled them to have more agile and fluid responses to the uncertainty and to the challenges that arose here. So this is why, when we took a look at what do we name this report, we talked about, or we named it Operating in the New Normal, because this was something that for some organizations was a market change, and for others, it was not as big a change, but without a doubt, for every organization, there was an impact, as we saw earlier. So we're seeing some progress here, and the use of e-invoicing technology has hit its highest mark in years. And we define e-invoices as, we're not talking about invoices that are PDF via supplier and then sent and then had to be printed out and then rekeyed in or scanned. And that's not an e-invoice to us. That's really somebody who has offloaded the delivery of that invoice and made the printing of that and the entering that information, put the onus on the buying organization rather than the supplier. So we're talking about true e-invoices, so digital to digital connection there. So an invoice that is sent by a supplier in a format that can be ingested automatically. We've seen this reach its apex here, and 55% is the highest we've seen since we've been doing this survey. And while we're happy with the momentum that we're seeing here, we still obviously have a long way to go. This number is up 10% year over year. Last year, we were just over 50%. So now we're at 55. So 10% in any other year would be a huge increase, but given everything that's been going on, we really expected to see a higher number here. And we're hopeful going forward that with all the automation initiatives and with all the understanding of the pain and uncertainty that remains in the world and the likelihood that we'll be forced to work from home or remotely potentially again, that organizations are going to find a way to finally eliminate paper on a much grander scale that's here. Similarly, e-invoices are on the front end of the process. The back end of the process is once that invoice has been approved and it's ready for payment, we're seeing once again the highest level of payments being made electronically, hitting 60%. And so while this is almost 10% higher than the front end, once again, it still has a long way to go in our minds, but it's something that we're seeing a lot of momentum once again. Suppliers need to be paid. We need to figure out ways to do so outside of paper checks there. The dangers and challenges of relying on paper checks for B2B payments, as hundreds of thousands of businesses in North America do, if not millions. uh, it is an alarming fact, and it's something that those organizations that were relying on paper needed to figure out ways to overcome these challenges. And like I said, many times it was by forcing workers or having workers go to work to actually print the checks out and then bringing a signature there with them, or delivering the checks to the signature for signing and then having to post them. So a rather inefficient process. This is, once again, is a number that we expect to see grow during the year ahead and years ahead, excuse me. So a big trend we've seen in the past 2 years is that invoice fraud was on the rise. This was certainly true during the pandemic. And unfortunately, as we know, when disaster occurs, there's criminals who look to capitalize on the fears and uncertainty that arise. And as workers were working from home and remotely, and organizations put these mandates in place, unfortunately, there weren't the security controls and compliance and policies in place to handle, many functions, and payments was certainly one of those. So what we saw was that while 62% reported no attacks, almost 40%, so 4 out of 10 organizations reported an attack during the past 16 months. Now, this is quite alarming. FBI data has also shown that the level of business email compromise and other fraudulent attack types have been on the rise in the past year, and it's reached new levels. So it's something that these attacks weren't all successful, but many of the participants in our member community that I spoke to expressed to me, concern, and also told me stories about how they were victims of fraudulent attacks. Some were successful, many weren't. Some were lucky, some were unlucky. I heard of one story. I talked to a health provider that was the victim of a fraud attack, and they brought in the local authorities and then ultimately the federal authorities, and they found out that organized crime was the one that was involved in this. And other times it was more local, not organized type criminals. But the point here is that fraud is on the rise, and if you don't have policies and procedures and technology in place to mitigate and to prevent and to alert to these attacks, you're putting yourself at risk. So this slide has a lot going on with it, but we wanted to talk about the levels of automation within AP, because many times you hear that some people say they're really automated and they've automated one part of the function or the other function. What we've seen here is that the levels of automation within AP vary quite significantly here. In green, we see those respondents that have fully automated those specific functions. In yellow, those were somewhat automated, so there's processes that are automated, but it's not a full straight through processing type scenario. And then in the red, we're looking at those that are manual and not automated at all. So there's quite a lot to digest here, but we can see is that there's a long way for AP to go. We've made some great strides, but there's still significant opportunity for automation. Scott, what jumps out on you on this slide?
Yeah, the kind of towards the middle, I think the one where you see the least amount of automation, this is where we kind of stake our claim. We tell a lot of folks that the Chinese proverb says, better to have one sharp knife in a fight than 5 dull ones. we tout ourselves as the sharp knife in accounts payable, and really the focus is eliminating the exceptions that typically are involved in AP automation, but more importantly, automating those exceptions. And that, I mean, you hit it right there when you said straight through processing. Our goal is to get as few touches as possible throughout the process. And that comes from a robust rules-based technology that allows you to, certain exceptions are just, they're going to come out of nowhere, and you got to deal with them. But surprisingly, a lot of organizations make exceptions kind of the norm or the rule. And exception truly should be just that. And so there's a lot of things that are being handled manually today, or an attempt to somewhat automate them that in reality could be fully automated. For example, let's say a purchase order comes in and that it's a two-way match to the receipt, and it's awaiting a three-way match, and it's being held up because of that. What we can do is set up rules to notify or ping maybe the buyer that says, hey, look, you've purchased this, you've likely received it, just make sure you update the receipt so that we can flow through and process to pay. Just having that rule in place after call it 30 days, 3 days, or whatever time element or frequency you put in place, but having that automation just moves the process so much more quickly. So accounts payable doesn't need to take that extra manual effort to reach out to purchasing and say, hey, can you make sure you put in the receipt so that we can process this to pay? Just one example, but that's what we focus on.
Yeah, and the truth about exceptions are, if you don't address them and correct them, they're going to keep occurring week after week, month after month, year after year. And so basically, you're just fighting the same fires every single month when it comes to managing that specific exception. So exception management is something that needs to be prioritized. You need to understand why exceptions are occurring, what information is missing, and work to correct that. Because if you don't, you're kind of spinning your wheels, and you know that every month you're going to have to do the same thing over and over. So one of the things that we advocate, when working with clients, is understanding where your exceptions are coming from, working to tackle the ones that are the biggest offenders, and then chipping away at those. And as you do that, your levels of automation increase, and it has that ripple down effect throughout the entire process, making it much more efficient. So while there's several insights to draw from the ePayables adoption numbers on the screen here, one major factor remains clear. More and more AP organizations are trusting and relying on technology to support their overall goals and objectives. This is in stark contrast to our not too distant past of 5, 10, 15 years ago, when this was not the case. Back when I first started working in AP in 2005, and I was in B2B payments before that, there was really no way to share information within different departments. We've come a long way over that time period, and we're continuing to progress as a function, and more technologies being addressed, or more and more processes being addressed with technology within the AP and P2P functions here. So let's take a look at the best in class. I know we're running a little long here, and as you can see, Scott and I are passionate about this and could talk about the results here for hours here. So I talked about the best in class accounts payable, and at Ardent, just to redefine it again, we've been doing this for the past 12 years at ArdentPartners. Is that best in class is defined as those 20% top respondents with the lowest cost to process an invoice and time to process an invoice. So let's take a look at some of the results that we see here, from this. One of my, favorite slides, because it's actionable, and, it's tough to argue some of these points here. You can say, well, automation is going to help, and they say, okay, but how much? So what we have is years and years of data that points to best in class organizations, those with the lowest cost and time to process an invoice being the ones that are achieving the best results within AP. So we saw that best in class organizations are able to process invoices about 4 times less expensively than everybody else out there. So while that $8 and change may not seem like significant, if you extrapolate that over 100 invoices, 1,000 invoices, 10,000 invoices on a monthly basis, you start talking real money here, and something that is a significant improvement. Also, the time to process an invoice. Best in class organizations, once again, are about 35–40% faster in processing an invoice, and can do it from receipt all the way through ready to pay in just over 3 days. And why is that important? Well, it puts you in the driver's seat as an organization. And actually, once an invoice is received and is ready and approved for payment, it becomes an asset to your organization until it's due. And so you can determine what you want to do with that asset. Do you want to pay that invoice early and receive a discount? Do you want to contact your supplier and see if they'll, accept a discount for receiving their money early? So you can get in the driver's seat, and you're actually sitting on an asset, not a liability. Because most of us think that, invoices are liabilities, and they are. But once that invoice is approved and ready to pay, you're now, however fast you've approved that, how much window you have left before that invoice is due, now becomes an opportunity for your organization. And so this is something that you can leverage to improve the overall profitability of the organization. We talked about exceptions. Best-in-class organizations are 2.5 times less likely to have an exception when it comes to an invoice. Now, a point of note here is that 10% exception rate for best-in-class is still really high. And if you ask most organizations, if 10% is where they want it to be when they're in the best-in-class category, they would say no. So there's still areas for improvement, across the board here as well. Invoices processed straight through. Scott and I have talked about that a number of times here throughout the presentation. And that is when an invoice is sent by a supplier, received, approved, and ready for payment without any human interaction. You have business rules that are put into place for the receipt, the capture of the information. You determine whether or not that invoice can match against a PO or a goods receipt, or is within certain tolerance levels, et cetera. And so best-in-class organizations are able to get almost 2/3 of their invoices processed straight through. Why is this important? Because they can spend time doing other more important value-adding activities. There's no benefit to an organization to having to track down missing information. That's time that could be better spent on more strategic activities, understanding how we can improve profitability and performance within the department and the organization. And then, interestingly, the last thing here, which is along the same lines here, is how much time does your AP department spend handling inquiries from suppliers? So, think about it. If you look at the screen here, the average organization spends about 1/4 of their time handling inquiries to AP. That's picking up the phone, where's my payment, tracking down information. This is all time that's very tactical and labor intensive in nature. Think about if you could eliminate that, or a good portion of that. Think about how much time you would capture back to be able to spend on other activities, or maybe able to grow your organization without adding staff here. So best-in-class organizations spend about just under half as much time responding to inquiries as do everybody else. And that's because they've automated the process. They have better procedures and policies in place to help achieve straight-through processing. So when we look at how AP is going to up their game and get to the next level, it's with smarter systems and better tools for analyzing data. This is a market departure from just a few years ago, as we mentioned, when AP was focused primarily on removing tactical tasks from their operations, and the emergence of more strategic thinking bodes extremely well for the AP function going into the future. So as we can see here, we wanted to know how AP is going to get to that next level. And the top 2 answers by a significant margin were more strategic, data hub of intelligence, access to information. So AP is starting to shift how it's thinking. And as I said, this is a market departure from where we were just a few years ago. And this bodes well, because as you start to think more strategic, you're taking more strategic actions, you're looking to eliminate inefficient operations. So making sure we have time for everything that we have here. So what we learned from this year's survey, from talking to best-in-class respondents, from talking to clients of ours, from interviews that we've conducted, and from the community, the AP community in general here, is that certain things need to be done in order to achieve success. And so, first and foremost, we need to take a step back and understand, take a look at the past year and a half or 2 years and understand what caught AP off guard, what we were prepared for, what weren't we prepared for, how did we respond, was that the right response? So it's important to do this, not only from an AP perspective, but also understand what your users of the AP function, and that's, as I mentioned, that's everybody else. That's the line of business, that's procurement, that's IT, that's your suppliers. Talk to them and ask them, what did we do well? Where could we improve? Because once you have that in place, then you can start working on a plan to fix some of these things and to make sure that when uncertainty strikes again, and one thing we're certain of is that more uncertainty will happen in the future. So you want to be prepared for it as best as possible. Second is, did you have a disaster recovery plan in place when disaster struck and when everybody was forced to work from home with all the mandates that were put into place? Some organizations did, many organizations did not. If you didn't have one specifically for the AP function, I highly recommend considering developing one for you. And then as you develop this plan, make sure that you're reviewing it on a regular basis, and that basis may be 6 months and maybe annually, to make sure that it's up to date and things have changed and you're adopting the plan as technology changes and as your business changes as well. Many organizations, there's a large consumer product goods organization out there that I talk to that everyone would be familiar with. I mentioned their name. That said, for the past 20 years, they've had a disaster recovery plan in place and actually encourage and require their employees to work from home 1 day a month, so that should they be ever had the need to work from home on a more regular basis, they are prepared for it. That served them well. So make sure you have a disaster recovery plan in place. Scott and I have mentioned this numerous times, but AP is sitting on a wealth of information. Make sure that AP is sharing that information and sharing the data it has with the rest of the organization, because that's the opportunity to continue to improve the perception that AP has within the organization. And as you provide more information that's used by more constituents within the organization and outside, a funny thing is going to happen. It's kind of this, catch-22 situation. The more information you provide, the more information they're going to want, the better perception it is of AP. And so it's this kind of continual effect there. So as you provide more information, the perception of AP is going to increase because you're going to provide better and more information as time goes on here. Something that happens in some organizations but is not uniform across the board is make sure you're investing and taking time to train your AP staff. They need to understand not only how they can do the AP function better, but also what does the full P2P cycle look like? What's importance on B2B payments? How can we mitigate fraud? What to look for in fraud? There's many different areas that you can train your staff on. If you don't have a plan in place for that, please consider putting one in place, because we want to make AP an attractive place to work, and AP is going to be more attractive if the people that work there believe that you're investing in them and their future, and it's not just a place where someone goes to handle paper and shuffle paper and improve things around. But as you start training folks, they become more proficient and you get more value out of them, and so it serves everyone better. There's better employee morale. They believe they're valued as an employee, and as employees are valued more, they add more value to the organization. Don't settle for just, hey, we brought in an automation tool and call it a day. That's the baseline. That's the starting point here. As I mentioned, AP automation is a journey. It's not a destination. So yes, we need to start somewhere. We need to bring the tools in. We need to start looking at some of the basic processes. But as we're doing that and as we start hitting our milestones, keep moving those milestones and keep looking for continual improvement here. There's a wealth of information, a wealth of value that's been largely untapped within AP. Figure out how you can unlock that, provide that to the rest of the organization. And then the past year and a half, as we've mentioned a number of times, has provided AP with more visibility and more prominence, if you will, within the organization. and the perception of AP has never been higher. Seize on this moment. Strike while the iron is hot. We've all heard that term there, that saying there. If you're looking to automate, if you're looking to hire, if you're looking to get raises for your people to increase the budget, now is a great time to do it, because in the eyes of the C-suite, they understand the value that AP brings, and it's best to ask for something when the perception is at the height or the highest it's been, perhaps ever within your AP department. So don't let this opportunity go by its way. Don't say, yeah, we're going to do this in a couple of years. Think about doing things now, because now is a great time to do it. So with that, Scott, anything that I've missed that you'd like to add as far as strategies for success that you've worked with in your career and with your clients, or anything else you'd like to comment on here?
Yeah, I think this is, we ask a lot of, or I guess we're asked a lot of times, what can we do in accounts payable to make things better? What's a good strategy? And you can kind of see it from your market research. I don't know if we just have a minute or so, but just click back to slide number 22. This is insightful, and I think it's helpful to maybe even end on what we share with a lot of groups is look for a partnership, an organization that is really good with a supplier portal. If you look at the yellow, the plan to use within 2 years, you can see the two largest are self-service portal at 35%, and then electronic invoicing solution at 30%. So most people are identifying this, and they're recognizing, okay, in order to achieve some of these best-in-class outcomes, I need to add something a little more robust and rigorous to my overall automation package solution. As Bob mentioned, journey. Part of that journey is get a good portal, and everybody will tell you they've got a portal, but it's a partnership. Being able to have an organization that is used to onboarding, helping suppliers to onboard, is used to that supplier connection and communication, is used to helping you really in a partnership, not just provide the tools and technology, but the process to engage those stakeholders. When suppliers get in and they're comfortable, it's a change management process. By no means are we saying this is going to be easy, but you will see how effective your invoicing experience becomes, not just for you, but for the entire community of invoicing, your internal and external stakeholders. So we would just put that plug in there that you look for somebody that's really good that you can partnership with and make your electronic invoicing be what gets you to that best in class.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, Scott. Onboarding suppliers is something we didn't kind of go into in depth here, but just having a solution doesn't mean that your suppliers are going to be using that solution. So as you mentioned, it's a change management process that's there. And the more suppliers that you have using your portal, submitting invoices electronically, gaining information through that portal, will reap huge benefits for your organization there. And so the self-service supplier portal, we talked about the number of inbound inquiries to AP and the amount of time that AP spends on it. And the average time for all others was almost 25%. With a self-service supplier portal, rather than picking up the phone or sending an email, they can go to the portal and find out that information as well. Bingo. And so there's, it's serving many benefits, as you said, and finding a solution provider that has experience, not only with a supplier portal, because as Scott said, there's a lot of supplier portals out there, but what kind of engagement do they have with their suppliers actively using that portal is really more important. What kind of experience do they have? What kind of experience do the suppliers have in the onboarding process? Are all critical to the process here. But as Scott showed here or mentioned, that 35% plan to adopt the technology within 2 years. That's because people are starting to understand that the old ways are not tenable going forward there.
Excellent.
So with that, I think we're kind of at our full hour here. I'm going to go to the end here, and there's contact information. If you had a question that we didn't get to, we apologize. We will address it afterwards. If you'd like to receive a copy of the presentation, please reach out to Scott or the team at iPayables. Scott's information is on the screen here, and he'll be happy to share not only the presentation with you, but he also has a copy of the State of ePayables report, which he can share with you as well. So if you want to see, the full report, and what we touched on today was really just scratching the surface of what we covered in the report. But please, reach out to Scott and the iPayables team to request that presentation and that research report, and they'll be happy to share that with you. So on behalf of Ardent Partners and myself, Bob Cohen, I wanted to thank you for your time today. Hopefully you found this worthwhile. We covered quite a lot of information, a lot of ground. And as I said, you can see Scott and I are passionate about this, and we could probably talk for hours amongst ourselves, but we contained ourselves to just an hour here. And so, Scott, it's a pleasure working with you, and thank you, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. Sure appreciate it.